Next, let's talk about weapons conditions. So there are 4 weapons conditions for just about all weapon systems. Sometimes there's only 3, but for this one here, the semi-automatic shotgun, we're going to be talking about 4. Now, a weapons condition is just relative to the condition of the weapon system itself. Is it loaded or is it not loaded, or is it partially loaded? So let's talk about the 4 weapons conditions for a semi-automatic shotgun. So the 2 main factors that we want to take into consideration are always, are there going to be shells in the tube and shells in the chamber? Now, a shell is this right here. This is a dummy round. This means that it's training only. There's no ammunition, but it is sized accurately enough to where I could run drills, loading, unloading drills, things like this, teach and instruct. So if you don't have any dummy shells or dummy rounds, feel free to click a link, I'll provide it, and you can get these pretty cheap, 20 bucks or something like that on Amazon. Now, are there any shells in the tube? The tube is like the storage area, what would more commonly be referred to as a magazine. And depending upon what state you're in, you might be able to have magazines in your semi-automatic shotgun. But in Illinois, we can't, because that's a different story. So are there shells in the tube or magazine? And is there a shell in the chamber? That's all we're really concerned about when it comes to these weapons conditions. And then for one of them, we're going to talk about a feed tray, but right now we're just worried about the tube and the chamber. So as you see this weapon here, I have no shells in the tube and nothing in the chamber. So this is a condition 4 weapon. No shells in the tube, no shells in the chamber. Notice how the order that I'm going in with this too. Always start with the tube or the magazine, then go to the chamber. And there's a reason for that, because when we download the firearm, we're going to want to move in a specific order, but we'll cover that later. So condition 3 would be a shell in the tube, but no shell in the chamber. If I pull the trigger on this right now, the gun's not going to go off. I have to do a couple of things in order to actually get that shell inside of the chamber to fire this weapon system. Now don't worry, we're going to go over loading and unloading here shortly in just a minute, but what you're going to notice is that the weapons conditions are also the process thereof loading and also unloading. So we'll cover that in a moment. Just know that condition 4, no shells in the tube, no shells in the chamber. Condition 3, shells in the tube, but no shells in the chamber. Now condition 2, after we've maximized the storage space in this tube here, this particular gun holds 7 shells in the tube. So after we have our 7 shells in the tube, we're going to want to move this weapon to condition 2. Now this is how I recommend you store the gun for various reasons. Shotguns, if they get bumped or knocked over, they sometimes have a tendency to actually drop the firing pin and go off. Not on some of the newer models, but like on some of the older ones, for example. I do know of a couple of instances where that happened. But if we store the gun in condition 2, we don't have to worry about that because it's not going to go off. The other thing is it's very simple and easy, as you'll see here in just a moment, to get this gun up and ready. Some people might say, well, seconds matter in a home invasion, and you're absolutely right. But if you have the appropriate 4Ds, then you're going to have enough time to simply cock this lever to the rear, release it, and then go condition 1. But let's talk about condition 2. So, shells in the tube, shells in the feed tray here, no shell in the chamber. Now after we've filled up this tube, how do we get shells in the feed tray here? Well, for this specific weapon system, semi-automatic shotgun, we have this release lever, this button right down here. And after you have your shells in the tube, it's spring operated, you push down on this lever, and what that does now is that actually puts a shell on that feed tray. Again, if we pull the trigger, this gun will not go off. This is how I recommend you store this gun. This is condition 2. Shells in the tube, shell in the feed tray, no shells in the chamber. And now lastly, condition 1. Condition 1 is shells in the tube, shells in the chamber. Now, all you have to do if there's a home invasion or some sort of criminal activity taking place, when you're storing it in condition 2, is just pull back on this lever, release it, and now you have a condition 1 weapon system. Shells in the tube, shells in the chamber. Don't worry about the fact that there's nothing on the feed tray. When you fire this weapon system, some of that gas is going to go push back on the other shells that are in the tube, and it's going to automatically rechamber a shell for you. So you don't have to worry about that at this point. But you see how quickly and effectively you can go from condition 2 to condition 1 in a matter of a fraction of a second. Definitely worth the safe firearm storage practice, because a lot of kids, a lot of people don't teach their family members or visitors properly. Sometimes things just get lost and they get knocked over. So we don't want to increase the risk. We want to mitigate that risk of an incident in the home, and that is how you do it, by storing it in condition 2. So just to recap, condition 4, no shells in the tube, no shells in the chamber. Condition 3, shells in the tube, no shells in the chamber. Condition 2, shells in the tube, shells in the feed tray, no shells in the chamber. And in condition 1 is shells in the tube and shells in the chamber. And then ultimately, when we go to unload this weapon system, we're unloading it into a condition 4 state. No shells in the tube, no shells in the chamber. More on that here in just a second.